Hello. My name is Belle. I am a 28-year-old mother who has recently embraced motherhood for the first time, despite having experienced the upheaval of a divorce. I can affirmatively state that this new chapter has introduced positive transformations into my life. Allow me to share my journey with you. I first crossed paths with my now ex-husband, Richard, during our college days. We were introduced by friends we both trusted, and there was an instant connection between us. Our relationship quickly escalated from casual meetings to dating. And before long, we decided to make things official. It's crucial to point out that Richard was my first serious relationship. Prior to him, my romantic life consisted solely of brief infatuations. Venturing into a relationship with Richard meant navigating entirely new territory for me. Due to my inexperience and a certain youthful naivety, I overlooked numerous red flags, choosing instead to focus on making our partnership work. After graduation, Richard persuaded me to relocate to his hometown, citing more promising career prospects. While this move proved advantageous for him, I found myself struggling to secure fulfilling employment. Eventually, we agreed that I would assume the role of managing our home. 3 years after our move, Richard proposed, and we had a modest wedding at the local courthouse. While I had always envisioned a traditional wedding, financial constraints, exacerbated by Richard being the primary breadwinner and our recent investment in a home, meant scaling back our plans. About 6 months into our marriage, I was fortunate to secure a decent job, bringing much-needed relief. Stepping back into the workforce felt liberating after years of isolation at home. Looking back, it's astonishing how I managed to endure those solitary years. With my new employment, I began to contribute financially to our household, though Richard preferred that I not contribute to the mortgage payments. Instead, I used my income to pay off my student loans and cover other domestic expenses. Our life began to stabilize. But approximately 6 months later, Richard initiated a pivotal discussion that would eventually reshape our future. We had been married just over a year when he broached the subject of starting a family. The thought of having children had indeed been on my mind, particularly as many of our friends were embarking on parenthood. Many of our friends have begun starting their own families, and the thought of having miniature versions of ourselves is indeed charming. However, we must seriously consider our financial position at the moment. Both of us are still paying off student loans, and we have a mortgage to handle. Our current incomes simply don't provide the means for us to comfortably support a child. Introducing a child into our already strained financial situation could potentially exacerbate our difficulties. I understand there's a strong desire to just find a way to make things work. We always seem to manage somehow. Yet, I believe it's not appropriate for us to struggle financially when we are currently managing well without the additional responsibility. It isn't about selfishness, it's about being wise and responsible. I recall when we decided to purchase our home. Richard, it was largely driven by your enthusiasm. Even though I had reservations, I always strive to back your dreams and goals. But they must be financially reasonable for us both. It feels like whenever we discuss this matter, you perceive my concerns as mere excuses. I know you've always envisioned having children, and I'm not ruling it out entirely. I'm simply proposing that we wait until our financial circumstances are more favorable. I do not want to indefinitely delay our plans to start a family, but I also cannot agree to rush into such a momentous life decision under our current conditions. You've mentioned that we need to make a choice soon, or it might spell the end of our relationship. I don't want to be pressured by such an ultimatum. Nor can I agree to start a family under the stress of a looming deadline. This decision should be made with love and thoughtfulness, not out of fear of losing what we share. Over the past week, I've tried to convey my perspective to you, Richard, but it seems to only increase your frustration. In a desperate bid to preserve our marriage, I hesitantly agreed to move ahead with planning for a child. Your happiness was evident, but internally, I felt deeply conflicted and distressed by the decision. It's challenging to be in this scenario, realizing the person I cherish is prepared to leave over our differing views on starting a family. I've always wanted children, but only under circumstances where I could provide a stable and secure environment for them. I wish you could understand and consider my viewpoint, instead of dismissing it. Initially filled with shared excitement over the news of my pregnancy, Richard seemed genuinely supportive, particularly as I navigated the challenging first trimester. However, as we approached the third month, a noticeable shift occurred in his demeanor and behavior. Richard began to spend excessive hours at work, distancing himself from home responsibilities and our shared journey of parenthood. Despite my pleas for him to reduce his work commitments due to my increasing physical discomfort, which made daily activities strenuous, he grew irritable and dismissive of my requests. Feeling increasingly isolated, I was compelled to manage on my own. Regrettably, Richard's detachment only intensified. He started returning home late, often inebriated, initially excusing his behavior with claims of celebrating professional milestones with colleagues. Eventually, he ceased to offer any justification at all, leaving me to feel more secure during his absences. The situation escalated to a point where I was left to cope not only with my own well-being but also with Richard's erratic and unpredictable behavior. There were unbearable days when the pain immobilized me, making it impossible to even leave my bed for the restroom. And those were the times when Richard was unreachable. By the 7th month of the pregnancy, my struggles had magnified. Then, one particularly distressing evening in the 8th month, Richard staggered home drunk, marking the 4th consecutive night of such behavior. Reaching my breaking point, I confronted him. Richard, this is the 4th time this week you've come home drunk, I said. Shut up, Belle, he snapped back dismissively. This stupid pregnancy has turned you into such a prude. Just get over it and let me have a good time. This stupid pregnancy was your idea, I retorted, my voice filled with disbelief and anger. You begged me to have your children. The least you could do is be here for me while I'm going through this. In a cruel twist, Richard turned his phone towards a woman on the screen. Say hello to my new lover, Tiffany. Lover. Are you cheating on me? I asked, incredulous and shaken. What? You didn't know, he scoffed derisively. How was I supposed to know that? And how dare you? I exclaimed, my voice trembling with emotion. How dare I? How dare you, he retorted vehemently. You've been so sad and sick, it's off-putting. Of course. I had to find someone else to satisfy my needs. His cruel words shattered any remaining illusions, confronting me with the stark reality of his betrayal. Navigating the turbulent waters of pregnancy can be challenging under the best circumstances, but facing it alone compounded the difficulty immensely. When I found out I was expecting, I imagined sharing the joy and anticipation with Richard, the father of our child. Instead, he not only withdrew his support but also shattered my trust by being unfaithful. The pain of his betrayal and the unsustainable nature of our relationship weighed heavily on me, prompting me to consider some hard decisions about the future for both myself and our unborn child. In the midst of this emotional turmoil, I confronted Richard. "You pleaded with me to discuss our issues. Yet you deflect by blaming me for your shortcomings. It's hard to believe that my pregnancy has been an inconvenience to you. Have you considered what I'm enduring? Throughout this ordeal, you haven't shown any concern for my well-being. Instead, you've been numbing your guilt with alcohol, leaving me to struggle through each day. How could you be so cruel as to bring the woman you cheated with into our home repeatedly? Your constant grievances do more than irritate, they cut deeply with every word and action." I continued, my frustration growing. "Don't dismiss me as a drama queen. You seem to think that cheating is a minor offense compared to other forms of abuse. How can you justify your actions by comparing them to worse scenarios? You argue that this arrangement allows you to fulfill your desires while still maintaining the facade of a husband. But your lack of empathy is astounding." The conversation escalated as I asserted, "This is unbelievable. You need to end this affair and leave our home. This is non-negotiable." However, Richard resisted, claiming ownership of the house because he paid the mortgage and suggested that I should be the one to leave. "How can you even contemplate throwing a woman who is 8 months pregnant into the streets?" I protested. Yet, he remained adamant, convinced that my departure would liberate him from my complaints and allow him to enjoy his life unencumbered. The situation reached a breaking point one cold night, as Richard forcefully led me to the front door and expelled me from our home. He smirked cruelly and slammed the door shut behind me. Standing in utter shock on the doorstep, I could hardly believe what had just occurred. Overwhelmed and numb, I began to walk away from the house, alone on the quiet, dark streets, vulnerable and stripped of essentials like a phone, wallet, or house keys. The only companions I had were the sharp pain of Richard's betrayal and the physical toll of my pregnancy. As tears began to stream down my face as I stood alone, the distant sound of a car engine grew incrementally louder, signaling its approach. My pulse quickened with apprehension, conjuring up the darkest scenarios like abduction. Suddenly, a man stepped out of the car. As he walked towards me, his presence was unexpectedly comforting. He draped his jacket over my shoulders and greeted me with a warm, friendly voice. "Hi there. You look quite cold. Please, take my jacket." When I hesitated, he insisted kindly, "Oh no, it's okay. Please." I insist. With a gentle smile, he added, "Thank you. I couldn't help but notice you're out here alone at night and dressed quite lightly. Do you need a ride home?" I shook my head, my voice trembling slightly. "No. It's okay. I don't think I'm welcome back home anyway." His next question caught me off guard. "What do you mean? Is Richard not treating you well?" Startled, I responded, "Hold on. How do you know my husband?" The man revealed, "He's my son," leaving me speechless. "He told me that you had left him when he was a boy. I didn't abandon him. His mother cheated on me, and after she won custody, she filled his mind with lies about me." Stunned, I could only muster a shocked, "Whoa. What? He nodded. Yes. It's a long story. Maybe I'll share it with you another time. But for now, why aren't you at home? Surely, it's not safe for you to be out here in the cold, especially in your condition. I confessed, feeling the sting of betrayal. Well, Richard has a drinking problem. I could handle that. But today he crossed a line by bringing another woman home, claiming I wasn't fulfilling his needs. That's absolutely disgusting, he remarked, his expression darkening. I continued. I know. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I have no family here, and no friends nearby to stay with. I left my phone, keys, and cards at home. I'm literally left with nothing. Seeing my distress, he offered, I'll take care of that right away. How about I get you an Uber and book you a nice hotel for the night? Maybe tomorrow you can try to go back home. And if Richard lets you in, you can grab all your stuff and return to the hotel. Overwhelmed by his generosity, I asked, Really? But why would you do that for me? Because I know what it's like to be left alone in a tough situation, he explained, his eyes reflecting a depth of understanding. Let's ensure you're safe for tonight. Asked about Richard's past and why William thought he resembled his mother in his actions. William sighed deeply, his face a blend of sadness and resolve, as he began to recount the patterns of deceit and manipulation that had also marred his marriage to Richard's mother. He explained that seeing similar traits in Richard was disheartening and he had hoped his son would choose a different path. William continued, saying, I saw the signs of trouble early on in your marriage, and it pained me to watch you go through what I had experienced. I felt it was crucial to step in, especially considering your pregnancy. You don't deserve this stress, you need a serene environment now more than ever. Grateful for his frankness and support, I felt a complex mix of relief and concern. How could I start over? And what would that mean for my child? Seeing my apprehension, William reassured me. I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together. He then shifted the conversation to lighter topics, trying to ease the heavy atmosphere. We discussed potential next steps and how I could secure a stable and happy future for myself and my baby. William proposed several options, offering his help in each scenario. He suggested contacting a lawyer to discuss my rights and the best course of action moving forward. As we ate, I realized that despite the turmoil, I was in the company of someone who genuinely cared about my well-being. William's presence was comforting, and his willingness to help was a balm to my bruised heart. After lunch, William offered to drive me back to the hotel. And on the way, he shared more about his own life and struggles, deepening my understanding of his motives. He dropped me off with a promise to stay in touch and assist me in any way he could, ensuring that I felt supported and not alone in this challenging time. Back in my room, I sat by the window, reflecting on the whirlwind of events and the unexpected ally I had found in William. Despite the chaos, I felt a spark of hope for a fresh start, one where I could provide a loving and secure environment for my child, free from deceit and manipulation. The journey ahead would be tough, but with William's support, I felt prepared to face the challenges and build a better future. I delved into my questions, seeking to understand why William, despite his estrangement from Richard, was still informed about his whereabouts. My curiosity was piqued by his unexpected presence near our home that day. Puzzled why Richard had never once mentioned him during our entire relationship. Furthermore, I probed into his motivations for his generous assistance, including why he had gone to the lengths of arranging an Uber and a hotel room for me. William nodded, acknowledging my concerns, and began to clarify the situation. He shared that although he and Richard had initially grown distant, they had reconnected a few years ago, with William making efforts to repair their relationship. Just as they were beginning to make progress, William was required to relocate to Germany for work, which unfortunately put a strain on their newly rekindled bond. He expressed a commitment to address all my questions, hoping to shed some light on the situation and perhaps offer some comfort amid the chaos that had engulfed my life. He explained that his move to a different city for work might be the reason I hadn't heard from him in recent years, and it could also shed light on why Richard rarely spoke of him. William mentioned that Richard had once told him about my departure. He acknowledged that his own departure might have felt like another abandonment to Richard, but he had little choice as settling their divorce debts necessitated that particular job. Despite attempting to explain this to Richard, his efforts were met with the usual resistance from him. William detailed how he had been keeping tabs on me by making inquiries and doing some research. This led him to discover that Richard had remarried. He had only returned to town a few hours before attempting to reconcile with Richard. It was precisely when he was about to visit your place that he witnessed Richard throwing you out, which prompted him to approach you. Given the circumstances, and seeing that you had just been evicted, he took the initiative to arrange an Uber and a hotel room for you. He thought it best considering you might not feel comfortable immediately jumping into a stranger's car or moving into a new home right away. In hindsight, he recognized it was presumptuous to ask if you wanted to come to his place. As he had mentioned the previous night, William expressed his desire to prevent any further trouble for you because of his son. Having dealt with Richard's temper himself, he could only imagine how much more challenging it could be for you, especially now that you are pregnant and soon to be caring for a child. William expressed a keen interest in learning more about your past interactions with Richard so that they could be more strategic if situations with him escalated further. I am deeply grateful for William's support during these challenging times. His thoughtfulness and kindness have been a source of comfort, starkly contrasting with Richard's demeanor. For instance, William thoughtfully arranged an Uber for me, ensuring my comfort without imposing his own presence in his vehicle. This level of empathy and consideration is something I doubt Richard would have offered. During a recent lunch, William and I earnestly deliberated our next steps concerning my current predicament. He was visibly disturbed by Richard's actions and was proactive in seeking ways to rectify the situation. Our conversation took an interesting turn when I brought up the company Richard is employed by. It turns out William is well acquainted with the CEO, a testament to his significant status within our community. While I was aware of William's wealth, the full scope of his influence hadn't dawned on me until that moment. It was almost surreal to be sitting next to one of the city's most influential figures, strategizing about confronting his own son. William expressed his intention to reach out to the CEO with the hope of having Richard dismissed. Despite understanding the potential repercussions on Richard's career and our delicate financial state, my empathy for him was limited. Richard had previously left me during my pregnancy and eventually expelled me from our home, diminishing any lingering guilt I might have felt. The necessity to relocate to a different city for work is probably why you haven't heard from me in the last few years. It might also shed light on why Richard seldom discusses me. He once mentioned to you that I had left him, which could seem like another abandonment from his perspective. But I had no alternative. Settling our divorce debts required taking that job. And despite my attempts to explain the situation to Richard, he refused to understand, typical of his behavior. I've been making efforts to keep track of your whereabouts by asking mutual acquaintances and conducting some research. That's how I learned that Richard had remarried. I had only returned to town a few hours before I attempted to reconcile with him. Just as I was about to visit your place, I witnessed him throwing you out. That's when I approached you. Given the circumstances, and seeing that you had just been evicted, I arranged both an Uber and a hotel room for you. I figured that under such distressing circumstances, you might prefer not to immediately enter another home or ride with a stranger. Reflecting on my actions, I now realize it was somewhat thoughtless to ask if you wanted to come over to my place. As mentioned last night, I want to avoid putting you in any more difficult situations because of my son. Having personally experienced his temperamental nature, I understand that it could be even more challenging for you, particularly now that you are pregnant and preparing to care for a newborn. I would be grateful if you could share with me more about your previous interactions with Richard, so we can be better prepared if we need to address this legally. I am truly thankful for William's support during this challenging time. It's quite impressive to see his level of thoughtfulness and kindness, traits which are starkly different from Richard's. For instance, William thoughtfully arranged an Uber for me, rather than asking me to travel in his car, which speaks volumes about his consideration for my comfort, a courtesy I doubt Richard would have extended. During our lunch, William and I deliberated on the possible next steps concerning my situation. He was visibly disturbed by Richard's behavior and was keen on finding ways to hold him accountable. When the topic of Richard's employer came up, William expressed a keen interest, revealing his close connection with the CEO. It turns out, William is a prominent figure in our community. Though I was aware of his affluence, the full scale of his influence only became apparent then. It was almost surreal sitting next to one of the city's most influential personalities, planning retribution against his own son. William mentioned his plan to speak with the CEO of Richard's company, hoping to have Richard dismissed. Despite knowing the potential negative impact this could have on Richard's career and our precarious financial position, I found it hard to sympathize with him, especially after he abandoned me during my pregnancy and subsequently evicted me from our home, diminishing any last traces of guilt I might have felt. William also promised to connect me with the top divorce attorney in the city. This assurance gave me a mix of relief and excitement about the possibility of regaining control over my life and moving forward without Richard, drained from the day's intense discussions and revelations. I requested to stay another night at the hotel to avoid going back home. William generously offered his card and encouraged me to stay as long as needed. The next day, William accompanied me as I returned home to collect my belongings. I was filled with apprehension about the thought of seeing Richard again, despite his silence and lack of attempts to reach out to me. My resolve only hardened, transforming my initial fear into indignation. Upon our arrival, I requested William to stay in the car while I ventured into the house alone. Richard's expression shifted to one of shock upon noticing my presence. "You're back. Huh? Where have you been?" he asked, his tone dripping with a chilling detachment. "I've been getting support from a friend," I replied, maintaining my composure. "A friend? You don't have any friends here. Are you cheating on me too?" he accused sharply. "No. She isn't cheating," William interjected, joining me inside. I'm the friend she mentioned. And what are you doing here? Richard. I was meant to visit you last night but found you evicting Belle. She mentioned you were intoxicated and had another woman over. Is that true? It is. But I don't see how that's any of your concern, Richard retorted defensively. Oh. But it is my concern, William replied sternly. You know the ordeal your mother put me through during our divorce. I will not allow the same fate for Belle. What are you talking about? We're not getting a divorce, Richard responded. His confusion evident. Yes. We are, I stated firmly. William has been assisting me in locating a reputable divorce attorney. Dad. You're helping her? Richard's voice was tinged with disbelief. But you don't even know her well. You're choosing a stranger over your own son, he protested. Feeling betrayed. William spoke calmly yet firmly. Remember. Richard. As a teenager. You chose your mother over me. Which was deeply painful. Despite your choices. I've tried to mend our relationship. Enduring insults and investing financially to strengthen our bond. I've overlooked much. But I cannot ignore how you've treated Belle. Especially during her pregnancy. It mirrors the mistreatment I endured from your mother. It seems you're influenced more by her than by what's right. Richard shot back. My father accused me of ruining his life. But ironically, it's you who have intruded into my family life. How did I ruin your life when I complied with every demand? Even at my own expense. You were the one who cheated on me and threw me out in the middle of the night wearing nothing but my clothes. You're going to face the consequences. And there's nothing you can do or say to change that. As I made the decision to leave, I turned and walked towards the bedroom to begin packing my belongings. My heart was racing, filled with both nervousness and exhilaration as I took my first steps in standing up for myself. Experiencing a profound sense of liberation. Amidst my packing, I could hear the intense exchange between William and Richard downstairs. Richard was visibly angry. Furious that William was supporting my decision to leave. With William's help, I moved my essentials to a hotel room. A temporary sanctuary where I could gather my thoughts and rest for the day. The following morning, William was by my side as we started the divorce proceedings. Everything unfolded more smoothly than I had dared hope. My attorney was exceptionally supportive, offering to file charges against Richard for neglect and abuse. However, I chose to hold off until he had received the divorce papers. It was imperative for me to secure full custody of our child. My attorney meticulously prepared all the necessary documentation. And we decided to serve Richard with the papers after our child's birth to avoid any direct confrontations during my pregnancy. Thankfully, just a week after sorting everything out, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Once discharged from the hospital, William assisted in moving us into a new apartment. I was ready to begin anew. Far from the chaos of my past relationship. 2 weeks after giving birth, I instructed my lawyer to serve Richard with the divorce papers. As expected, his reaction was one of fury. He demanded a face-to-face meeting, which I cautiously agreed to at a cafe near his residence. When I arrived, he was already there, his demeanor fraught with tension. Upon seeing me, he stood and immediately launched into a tirade, vehemently challenging my actions. Are you seriously trying to strip me of my rights to our child? Why do you think you deserve any custody at all? Richard exclaimed, his voice laden with accusation. It was my body that endured the pregnancy. Not yours. You merely did what was biologically necessary for conception. Does that mean I shouldn't have the right to raise our son? I won't allow you to keep him from me. You're abusive and a drunkard. No court would grant you custody based on that alone. I could easily clean up my act and secure my parental rights. Despite Richard's confrontational stance and harsh words, William, who had been my steadfast ally through this entire ordeal, remained by my side, offering his support and ensuring that I did not have to face Richard's wrath alone. Previously, I had seen William make a decision that I once thought was a sharp business move, one that could have potentially benefited both him and Richard. However, he chose to cut all business ties with Richard. This decision significantly bolstered my trust in William's integrity and his deep-seated concern for both my welfare and that of my child. There was a time when he had offered me a promotion to assistant manager. But given the circumstances that unfolded, he prudently withdrew the offer. Occasionally, I find myself pondering how different life might have been if Richard had shown more kindness. Despite these reflections, I am at peace with my current life, though I do sometimes consider the roads not taken. Several months have elapsed since I initiated the divorce proceedings. Fortunately, Richard has shown a cooperative spirit, perhaps indicative of him taking my previous financial advice to heart. However, this cooperation no longer holds much significance for me. My son is flourishing, and William has emerged as a stable and loving figure in our lives. Professionally, I am experiencing success as well. Regarding Richard, the latest updates suggest he has struggled financially, failing to keep up with his mortgage payments, which has forced him to move back in with his mother. His mother, unhappy with William's presence back in town, bombarded me with messages criticizing my ethics for associating with someone she labeled as malevolent. Her disparaging remarks about William led me to question her opinions about Richard as well. In response, I chose to block her, distancing myself from such negativity. I have resolved to no longer be dictated by others on how to lead my life. For the first time in many years, I feel a profound sense of freedom. I've made a conscious choice to live life on my own terms and will not permit anyone else to influence my decisions. I am genuinely excited about the future and eager to see what lies ahead. Here's to embracing new beginnings and personal empowerment. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the above story? Tell us in the comments section. We'd like to hear your thoughts. That's for today's story. Please subscribe and give a thumb up. See you next time.